Okay, hi everybody. I'm Richard Kravitz, UCCS Director. It's great to see all of you here with us today. Thank you to both students and internship hosts. We're celebrating the students' achievements and we're expressing our gratitude as we do every term to our fantastic internship hosts who make the experiential learning component of our program possible. So thank you all, and we have a lot to get through. We've had 2 great sessions already. We're really looking forward to this one, so let's get going.
All right, and so just let everyone know about the format. So each student will present. After the student presents, we will take one question from their internship host site, so from the audience. If there's not a question from their internship host site, then we will go ahead and turn the question over to the academic team. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and start with Cassandra Rodriguez. Her home campus is UC Davis, and this term she interned with the UC Student Association. All right, Cassandra?
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
The UC experience, diversity and inclusiveness. 1 in 5 undergraduates at the UC actually feel dissatisfied with their college experience. I ask, do amounts of the diversity and inclusiveness satisfaction change over time for different ethnic groups? Well, I hypothesize that during the COVID-19 pandemic, racial and ethnic groups all dropped in satisfaction levels. But Asian Americans were hit the hardest due to inclusiveness effects of the presence of the virus. Conducting a bi-yearly overtime analysis on undergraduate students at the UC system-wide level, touching on their 0 to 100% raw satisfaction rate on academic experience, comfortability within campus climate, feeling respected, and feeling valued as an individual, all based on their race and ethnicity. Incorporating data from the UC Experience Survey. According to my findings, although Asian Americans have experienced an increase of implicit bias and racial discrimination, remarks-based differences in UC satisfaction levels, whereas African Americans continue to lead in the shortfall of satisfaction, as you can see in each figure. I propose policy implementations of new initiative programs that enhance undergraduate experiences, as well as improving campus racial conditions and engagement through mentorships.
All right, great. And so we'll go ahead and turn to questions from the audience if someone from, oh, great. So Ashraf Bashai, if you can go ahead. I've just unmuted you. There we go.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for all your work, Cassandra, with the UC Student Association. We've really enjoyed having you. I wanted to ask, what do you think is, or what do you think are ways for campuses to foster more inclusive environments on campuses and also embrace students for their racial identities that they bring to the university systems?
Great question. I think campuses can foster a more inclusive environment in the development of student belonging by introducing initiatives such as the act of providing diversity training to every incoming first-year class, educational and community engagement programs, providing opportunities for students from underrepresented groups. Mentorships, as well, as I mentioned, where students can discuss their college experience to other students from similar backgrounds.
Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you, Ashraf, for the question and for hosting Cassandra this term. Thank you, Cassandra, for your great poster presentation today. And so our next student is Ling Jin. Her home campus is UC Santa Barbara, and she interned at the UC Student Association this term. Ling Jin.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Income level and high school student educational achievement under COVID-19. Educational inequity in the US worsened during the pandemic as income inequality and distance learning made it difficult for low-income students to have equitable access to education and who are then falling behind in schools as a result. My research question is, what are the impacts of income level on high school student educational achievement during the pandemic? I hypothesize that if a school district's median household income is higher, then its high school graduation rate will also be higher during COVID-19 because students from school districts with higher income level are more likely to afford resources necessary necessary for online learning and educational success. To investigate the relationship between median household income and high school graduation rate, I did a small study grouping together 3 low-income, 3 average income, and 3 high-income school districts based on population, and compared the median household income and the 4-year adjusted cohort high school graduation rate in these school districts prior and during the pandemic from 2017 to 2018 and 2019 to 2020 school years. The differences between graduation rates for all school districts are trivial. While the high school graduation rate dropped in 3 school districts, it actually increased in 6 school districts from 2019 to 2020. Although the results do not support my hypothesis, it is important to note that the data is not comprehensive given the ongoing pandemic and that this learning did not start until March, so graduation for the class of 2020 was not much affected as most of them were on track to graduate before COVID-19 hits. For further research, I suggest tracking 4-year graduation rates for current freshmen, sophomore, and juniors who had to participate in this learning for a longer period of time and on whom this learning has a larger impact. Assessing the college going and readiness rates, junior to senior persistence rate, and graduation rates for students of all ethnicities can be very helpful as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ling Jin. And so over to the our audience, if you had a question. All right, Parshan.
Thank you, and great to have you, Ling Jin. It's been an honor having you. You've been incredible, and we'll be missing you. Question for you regarding your research project. I'm curious if you've been able to sort of take any look at how these rates compare when you break them down by different racial, ethnic, demographic backgrounds.
Yes, I did take a look at different demographic and student population makeup in just these different districts, and I found that with the low-income student district, they're predominantly Black and Latino with students, people of color and BIPOC student communities, and with in comparison, high-income school districts and even average income school districts, they have less number of disadvantaged students from historically underrepresented backgrounds and communities. So I do think that student demographics and population in that sense do take a role in this as well.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Parshan, for the question and also for hosting Ling Jin this term. So appreciate it. And so our next student is Diana Lua, and her home campus is UC Merced. And this term, she interned with the California Department of Education Legislative Affairs Unit.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. The state of California is composed of many acclaimed higher education institutions. Also composed of the most diverse population in the country, college attendance demographics are not reflective of the state population at large. Majority of students who attend college stem from middle class, predominantly those with a familial background in higher education and completion. A degree gap is created, separating low-income communities and underrepresented groups away from educational attainment. This research would aim to understand factors of the degree gap. Do students in low-income communities attend schools with fewer educational resources, and do schools with fewer educational resources produce lower higher education enrollment? I hypothesize that an increase in educational resources, more specifically college prep programs, will result in a higher attendance in college enrollment, hence attainment. Data for this cross-comparative analysis covered areas in Southern California, the Central Valley, and Southern California, ultimately finding similar results. Using free reduced lunch as a SES indicator, low-income students lacked accessibility to educational resources as illustrated in Figure 3. When comparing to middle-class students, the respective districts, college enrollment rates were significantly higher in areas where additional resources were provided, as seen in Figure 4. Students with higher college enrollment had more access to resources and more college prep courses, also known as IB courses, honors, and AP, and programs such as AVID and community college cross-enrollment. Understanding that public education as a top funding priority in California, working towards allocating educational resources to communities that lack the most would allow for a more flourished state economy. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Diana. And so, and we do have a question from the audience. So Ellie Garner.
Well, it was great to have Diana this semester as our intern, and we're super thankful for her. And so, Diana, my question to you is, based upon your research, we like to take findings and turn them into policy. What would be your recommended policy move to address the issue that you identified here?
Yeah, definitely. I think my biggest policy suggestion based on this research would to implement more AP honors IB courses in all school districts. The state of California does not have that as a requirement to have all public schools to have such resources. So I feel like if we're able to invest in all communities, I feel like there would be a strong increase in college enrollment.
Fantastic recommendation. Thank you so much. We loved having you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ellie, for the question and also for hosting Diana this term. And so our next student is Brenda Camacho. And thank you, Diana. I appreciate it. Great job. All right. And our next
everyone.
Brenda Camacho, and her home campus is UC Santa Barbara. And she interned this term with the California Department of Education Language Policy and Leadership Unit. All right, Brenda.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Essential yet unprotected, the life of an immigrant. California has the highest number of immigrants in the United States. In 2012, many young undocumented immigrants qualified for DACA, a program that provides protection from deportation and work permits. My research aims to analyze if DACA has financially improved the lives of immigrants. I hypothesize that DACA recipients have a greater chance at succeeding financially if they are given a path towards citizenship. If you take a look at Figure 1, you can see that the number of approved DACA applications has increased significantly over the years. Furthermore, Figure 2 displays the results from a survey in 2017 in which DACA recipients indicated a sense of improvement within their economic circumstances. In this study, more than 50% of DACA recipients stated that after their application was approved, they were able to get a job with better pay, improved work conditions, a job with health insurance, and other benefits. I'm measuring my variables by comparing the 5 most common occupations DACA recipients have in California with the yearly wages each occupation reported in 2017. My findings in Figure 3 indicate that the yearly salary for the most common occupations of DACA recipients ranges from $25,000 to $45,000. Although DACA recipients' yearly wages classifies them as low income and lower middle class, recipients are still indicating a financial growth in their lives. Overall, my research shows a correlation between work permits and a financial improvement within undocumented immigrants. Because legal protection has progressed DACA recipients' financial living situations, I propose that the DACA program should provide a path towards citizenship so that recipients can continue to grow their financial success. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. And if there is a question from the audience for Brenda, you can just go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. All right. If there's not a question from the audience, if there is a question from the academic team. All right, Professor Butters.
Hi, Brenda. Great job here. Ross Butters, professor over there, 196E with you guys. I think your poster turned out really well, and I thought I like the figures quite a bit. One of the things that stands out to me so much in this one is when you've got that Figure 2, which is what kind of things people did after the DACA application was approved. The one that really pops out to me is that people didn't start their own business by any means, really, at all. Less than 10%. I mean, not that many people really start their own businesses. But I was wondering what your thoughts on why maybe DACA recipients, rather than out there 25 or older, chose not to start businesses.
Thank you for your question. I think a part of a lot of DACA recipients not starting their own business is because you really need you need resources for that. And I also think that a lot of DACA recipients are not exposed to the possibility of having their own business. I think most DACA recipients are currently in school or they start working. So I think just starting their own business is possibly it's possibly not the case because of they're not exposed to that possibility. Additionally, I think it's important to note that many of these DACA recipients are fairly young because of the age requirements. So I think in the future, there is growth for them to start their own business.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brenda. Nice job.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brenda. And so then our next student is Anika Kubchandani. And so her home campus is UC Davis, and she interned this term at the California Department of Education Equity Office.
Hi, everyone. Just gonna wait until the last screen shares. Okay, perfect.
There we go.
Okay, great. Okay, California is currently experiencing a substantial shortage of quality K-12 educators. So to solve the issue of the teacher shortage, I question whether a performance pay scheme will recruit and retain teachers, alleviating the California teacher crisis. I hypothesize that implementing a performance pay scheme will recruit new teachers because the power of money influences the career decisions of college students, encouraging new and more academically advanced students to be inspired to enter the field. Also, the pay for performance scheme will retain teachers by incentivizing them to perform better in their current roles because they will be rewarded for their excellent performance. So to test my hypothesis, I conducted a comparative case study analysis by evaluating Denver's ProComp, a pay for performance scheme, to understand its effect on the recruitment and retention of teachers. And then I applied my findings to see if a similar program could work in Stanislaus County in California. As summarized in Figure 3, I studied the class enrollment size in addition to the percentages of students that qualify for free and reduced price lunch, are English learners, and identify as Latino of both Denver and Stanislaus County to make my comparison. I found ProComp had a positive effect on school level retention rates in both hard to staff and non-hard to staff schools as seen in Figure 4. Also, ProComp shifted the composition of Denver's teachers by recruiting more effective teachers as measured by mean growth percentile scores. But still, unfortunately, I cannot definitively say if a ProComp-like program will work in Stanislaus. Even though ProComp increased teacher recruitment and retention, there are many other issues with the program. For example, incentives did not appear to offset the other significant issues of school leadership and working conditions. So further research must be done to definitively say if performance pay schemes may be the solution to the teacher crisis. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Anika. And so in the audience, we do have a question. And so Diana Gutierrez.
Hi, great job, Anika. We really appreciated your presentation and your poster. And congratulations really for completing a very important research project and timely. Anika has been a really invaluable member of our team, and we are really going to miss her after this quarter. Anika, based on your research, what do you believe are the necessary elements needed in order to successfully implement a performance pay scheme model?
Yeah, I definitely think that there needs to be a feedback mechanism between school administrators and teachers. A lot of the times we think that just like incentivizing teachers through money is going to do the trick, but a lot of survey data showed that teachers really care a lot more about the work environment that they're working in, the collaboration they have with other teachers, and feeling heard and respected and recognized by school administrators. So I think a performance pay scheme can work because money does matter, but at the same time, there's so many other factors that need to be discussed both by teachers and administrators in order to put in place an effective performance pay scheme.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Diana.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana, for the question and also for hosting Anika this term. And so Anika, great job on your poster presentation. And then our next student is Maribel Gonzalez. Her home campus is UC Riverside. And this term, she interned for the California Community College Student Success Center.
Can everyone hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting In It Together, Make Success Equitable and Accessible for Transfer Students. I'll start with education should not have to be a privilege. It should be accessible to everyone. In 2011, the Associate Degree for Transfer, or ADT, was implemented to help students transfer from community colleges into a guaranteed safe spot at participating four-year universities, both throughout California and out of state. This is crucial to address given that community colleges register more students who are low income and first generation. However, higher education attainment is still an issue, as you can see in Figure 1. Moving forward, I theorize that the effectiveness of ADT correlates with the transfer rate of community college students to a four-year degree program. I use the ADT program to measure the effectiveness of helping students transfer from a California community to a four-year institution. I also compare transfer rates across 10 different community colleges 2 years before and 2 years after to analyze a time series of data and prove any significant correlation. Based on my research and data, there is no significant increase in transfer rates after ADT implementation in 2011. Furthermore, Black students are proportionally low across all 10 community colleges that I measure, reinforcing that racial disparities continue to prevail in higher education, as you can see in Figure 2. In conclusion, although ADT aims to help students transfer, there are still systemic barriers that need to be addressed to make higher education accessible to everyone.
Great, thank you so much, Maribel. And so we do have a question from our audience. And so Irma Castaneda.
Hi, thank you, Maribel, so much for your presentation and for joining us this term at the Success Center. We really enjoyed having you as an intern. And so my question is, how do you think your research can inform kind of future efforts to improve the transfer pathway for CC students? Thinking of the governor's dual admission proposal or anything like that. So we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So based on the research and data I collected, low income people of color, like first generation, are in need of the most resources, which informs the governor's efforts to create a dual mission that is intentional in helping the students. One, like being more state and federal funding to community colleges and to students financial aid. Most of them are in need of more financial help compared to other students based on the graphs that I got from the 10 community colleges. And then another would be like unifying the course requirements across campuses in regards to the ADT program to make transferring more effective. And I feel like that could help with the transfer rates increase. But however, I do know that there is still issues in campus capacity. So that's still something that should be addressed.
Thank you. Those are great ideas.
Great, thank you so much, Irma, for the question and also for hosting Maribel this term. And so Maribel, great job on your poster presentation today. Thank you. And then our next student is Laura Gonzalez, and her home campus is UC Merced. And this term, she interned for the UC Office of the President, State Government Relations. All right, Laura, great.
Hello, everyone. In 2012, Governor Brown made California the first state in the U.S. to legislatively recognize water as a human right by passing Assembly Bill 685 to ensure clean water access to all Californians. Without access to water, people are more likely to experience adverse health effects and are at greater risk of contracting diseases like COVID-19. This research is to determine if water access has been made more accessible, and I hypothesize that race and economic background contribute to inadequate plumbing access in California. To test my hypothesis, I have collected county-level data from the U.S. Census to observe household plumbing access reported from 2015 to 2019. The data reveals that since 2015, people reporting a lack of plumbing has been decreasing, as shown in Figure 2. In observing the relationship between poverty and lack of plumbing access, I found a slight negative correlation, as shown in Figure 3, meaning that higher poverty levels in a county do not correlate with higher lack of plumbing. I did, however, find that there is a slight positive correlation between race and plumbing, indicating that counties with higher ethnic minority populations do experience a greater lack of plumbing, as shown in Figure 4. The goal of addressing this research question is to identify social inequalities in California and encourage more research in water access to help disadvantaged communities have safe and reliable water. As a result, future policies must take into consideration providing more resources for vulnerable communities. Local governments must also work in collaboration with local water providers and housing officials to ensure all residents have reliable water access.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. And so if there is a question from the audience, all right, so Jennifer Price.
Hi, Laura. Fantastic job. This is such an important topic, and we're so lucky to have you in our office. My question for you is, which finding would you like to explore further? These are all really interesting findings you've collected.
Yes, so I thought it was very interesting when I found that my hypothesis on poverty was not correct. So I'd like to understand more about what other factors are contributing to lack of water access in communities.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for the question and also for hosting Laura this term. And Laura, great job on your poster presentation today. And so our next student is Mariah Lima Codeur, and her home campus is UCLA. And this term she interned for the Advancement Project.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. The cost of clean air, the discriminatory effects of air pollution in California. The epidemic of air pollution in the state as it relates to particulate matter 2.5 is especially relevant for those cities with high proportions of disadvantaged communities. In this project, I hypothesized that median annual decreases in PM 2.5 directly correlates to an increase in property values, used in this project as an indicator of community wealth over a period of 20 years in the 5 most populous California cities. To answer this question, I used a comparative time series analysis of historical data from the annual weighted mean of PM 2.5 and historical yearly median sales prices of single-family homes across these cities. My findings indicate a significant statistical correlation between air pollution levels and home values over time, with an average p-value of 5 to 6%. And a visual presentation of my average data demonstrates clear trends over time of a decrease in my independent variable PM 2.5 and an increase in my dependent variable home values, as demonstrated in Figure 3. However, a closer comparison of these results reveal that the differences in community wealth in these urban cities accounts for much greater discrepancies. As you'll notice in Figure 4, the city of Fresno has much lower property values compared to San Francisco, but carries a significantly higher pollution burden. Conclusively, while these results suggest that PM 2.5 is just one of many contributing factors towards community wealth, there is a noticeable pollution gap between low-income and high-income urban centers that must be addressed by California policymakers in the near future. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mariah. And so if there is a question from the audience, if you want to just go ahead and raise your hand. All right, otherwise we're going to turn it over to the academic team. A question from the academic team. All right, great. Professor Palmer.
Yeah, great work, Mariah. This is really interesting. I'm curious why you chose particulate matter 2.5 and what factors how that might be different across these different geographic areas of the state and what other pollutants might look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. So PM 2.5 was a good pollutant to look at on a local level because it affects communities more than other criteria air pollutants like CO2. And it's particularly relevant for California as well because it makes up a large component of wildfire smoke, which is something that's a big issue in California right now. So we look at some of these communities and see what are the effects of wildfire smoke. And we see that, you know, PM 2.5 has gone down over time in these cities. But that's been due to stricter regulation that California thankfully has to combat wildfire smoke. So I found that PM 2.5 was a good air pollutant to look at on the community level to kind of analyze that change over time.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Mariah. Great job on your poster today. And so our next student is Myra Vasquez, and her home campus is UCLA. And this term she interned for the California Mental Health Commission.
Hello, everyone. Today, over 60 million individuals in the United States have experienced mental health challenges, making it a major public health crisis. Black, Indigenous, people of color, or BIPOC are particularly vulnerable as they are less likely to receive services compared to their white counterparts, despite having similar rates of mental health needs. This brings me to the question, are mental health services accessible to BIPOC communities? I hypothesize that as whiteness decreases within counties, accessibility to mental health services also decreases. To test my hypothesis, I conducted a small comparative study of two sets of counties with similar population size and racial ethnic demographics, which is shown in Figure 2. I collected the number of mental health services available within each county in order to measure accessibility. Taking a look at San Diego, San Bernardino, Santa Cruz, and Merced, I found that counties with more people of color had less resources, making treatment and support less accessible, as shown in Figure 3. Overall, I found the number of services within each county is not sufficient enough to meet its community members' mental health needs, considering the ratio of population size and available services. My findings lead me to suggest that funding towards mental health care needs to increase statewide, but particularly in counties with individuals of color making up the majority. I also recommend existing services and health clinics to require culturally competent training in order to better serve BIPOC communities and encourage engagement.
Great, thank you, Myra. And so we're going to go ahead and take a question from the audience. All right, so we've got Dr. Amanda Lawrence.
Hi, Myra. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you for your presentation. Great work. It's been a pleasure having you at the commission this term. So my question for you is, other than the commission, who, as in what organizations, institutions, agencies, and so forth, do you think needs to know this information, and what should they do with it? Feel free to pick, one or two organizations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amanda, for your question. I was hoping that my research could be a resource to not just mental health services, but as well as substance abuse clinics or resources, because mental health and substance abuse are also intertwined. And I believe that this research that I conducted could be very valuable for them.
All right, great, thank you. So thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for the question, and also for hosting Myra this term. Myra, great job on your presentation today. And so our next student is Ruby Nunez, and her home campus is UC Davis. This term, she interned with Health Access.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get set up here. Cool. Thank you all for coming out today. Let's see. Ooh. Awesome. Okay, cool. So hello, everyone. So my question today is, are students supported equally across the undergraduate UC system? Schools are moving towards implementing more equitable and inclusive learning, resources and spaces, and some campuses I feel like might be more ahead than others. My research focuses on the relationship between graduation rates and the availability of resource centers, both general academic help and group specific. I hypothesize that campuses with more resource centers will have higher graduation rates than campuses that have less centers available to students. Similarly, I hypothesize that campuses with a higher number of minority-specific centers will have higher graduation rates than those with less. The data I'll be drawing from is from 2015 to 2019. Per Figure 1, you can see the comparison across each campus and the amount of resource centers available. These numbers were compared against the findings in Figures 2 and 3, which depict the graduation rates for individual campuses and the system as a whole, respectively. Campuses with 4 or more minority-specific resource centers had graduation rates consistently above 80% by 2019. General academic resource centers varied among each campus, but were relatively the same at each UC. Finally, graduation rates across the UC system generally increased within the 2015-2019 period. My findings were not as overwhelmingly supportive of my hypothesis as I initially thought. That being said, there is some evidence to suspect that academic resources do have an impact on graduation outcomes. Further research should definitely be conducted, analyzing the impact of these centers before and after their implementation. This was a limitation in my analysis due to lack of data on the matter. I recommend that UC campuses consider instituting more minority-specific resource centers to aid BIPOC students who may struggle with achieving academic success due to their historic marginalization. Having these supportive spaces can aid in overall experience satisfaction, which can affect academic efforts. Thank you all.
Great, thank you so much, Ruby. And so we'll go ahead and go to the audience, and if there is a question from the audience, if you can just raise your hand, I'll go ahead and call on you. And if not, we'll go to the academic team. So question from the academic team. All right, I see Paige Pelton.
Hi, Ruby. Great to see your project develop. My question is about whether or not you think white versus minority students are more or less likely to seek out these resource centers in the first place.
That's a really interesting question. I do believe, at least, so this is the reason that I kind of had this project was obviously inspired from my own campus. And so I noticed that like resource centers for minority specific groups were advertised a little bit more than the general academic help centers. But that being said, I as someone that identifies as within a minority group, didn't necessarily see myself going to these resource centers. And so that's an interesting question, because I do feel like most of the time, at least in my personal peer experience, like it is more so of my white peers that tend to go and like seek this help. I do think that's maybe more of a not necessarily access, but perception to access. And so that I think I would just then suggest that these centers normalize on their marketing and making it more, not necessarily more inclusive, but in the concept of being like, this is a normalized thing, just like it is normalized to go to a general academic help center. So, yeah.
Thank you for that insight.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Ruby. Great job on your presentation today. And so our next student is Karen Stout, and her home campus is UC Santa Cruz. And this term she interned with Political Solutions.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all today. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. So intimate partner violence is a systemic issue that permanently affects the lives of people across the nation. In the US, over 15.9 million women and 9.1 million men will be a victim of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And when laws allow intimate partners to petition for restraining orders, there has been a 13% reduction in intimate partner violence and a 16% reduction in IPV-related homicides. This led me to ask the question, how has the passage of laws restricting firearms for domestic violence offenders affected intimate partner violence rates in California? My hypothesis was that the passage of domestic violence firearm restriction bills in the period from 1992, when domestic violence deaths began to be measured, to 2019 would decrease the number of IPV-related firearm deaths in California. To examine this, I compared the years where relevant domestic violence legislation was passed with the percent change in the deaths per 100,000. Overall, I found that over the observed period, the percent per 100,000 of deaths has increased and decreased in waves, but has decreased overall. And in the years after legislation, there has been a significant drop. As a matter of fact, a 13% drop after relevant legislation. You can see the biggest impacts of this legislation in 2018, where there was a 50% reduction in intimate partner violence related deaths. This shows a consistent pattern of declining rates after the passage of relevant legislation, which in turn proves my hypothesis. Overall, this shows that bills should be focusing on long-term firearm bans for convicted offenders, as well as temporary bans for abusive behaviors that can lead to domestic violence, such as stalking. Other important factors to consider are streamlining the process for protective orders and completing regular check-ins with law enforcement and court systems to make sure that defenders are following the existing laws. So overall, I did find some very compelling legislation, and I believe that we can systematically decrease and overall help the problem of intimate partner violence in California.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. And so we'll go ahead and take a question from the audience. If anyone has a question from Political Solutions, just go ahead and feel free to raise your hand and I'll go ahead and call on you. All right, and if not, we will go over to the academic team. And so if there's a question from the academic team. All right, Professor Butters. Oh, no, I got Professor Pantoja.
Hi, great job, Karen. This is a really interesting presentation. I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit on the type of legislation that exists in California currently. Does it have like the 5 categories of IPV legislation that you have on your poster, or what's the status in California?
So California is actually very, very good in terms of firearm prevention and prohibition. As a matter of fact, the Giffords Law Center actually rated it with the only A in the nation in terms of a comprehensiveness of our gun violence legislation. Overall, gun violence legislation that is most pertinent to domestic violence falls into those 5 categories of IPV legislation you can see on my poster in figure 1, or sorry, on the far left. So that includes things like prohibiting firearms for people who are convicted of misdemeanors, for people who are under restraining orders, as well as the boyfriend loophole, which is a colloquial term used to describe the fact that federal law only prohibits firearms and convictions for people who are dating partners, while this includes anyone regardless of the relationship to the defendant. Overall, though, the most significant legislation that we see the biggest drops in are things like firearm prohibition for abusive behaviors such as stalking, as well as prohibiting firearms for people who have warrants out for domestic violence related crimes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. That was a great presentation. And then so we're going to go ahead and Brooke can go ahead and end the recording. Then we're going to just open up to open Q&A.